Russia says it has completed its call-up of 300,000 military reservists. Defense Minister Sergey Shoi-gu says over 80,000 reserve troops have already been deployed to Ukraine, with the rest still in training. President Vladimir Putin issued the mobilization order last month to beef up Russian forces in Ukraine. The call-up led to protests. It also prompted hundreds of thousands of Russian men to flee the country. For more, let's get across to Frank Ledwidge. He is a senior lecturer in strategy and law at the University of Portsmouth and a former military intelligence officer. Good to see you again. Can you tell us how effective these reservists who have arrived on the ground in Ukraine could be for the Russian military?
Well, good morning, Claire. Only about half of these 40,000, according to Putin, are actually going into combat. The other 40,000 are likely to stay behind as logistic support troops. Putin himself said that they were getting between 2 and 3 weeks training. That is insufficient, essentially, even to train you to use your rifle properly and work in a very small group. The effectiveness of the combat elements of this, which is about 40,000, as I say, and they'll be spread all over the front, will entirely depend on their commanders at the front. And they've been very variable. So the answer to your question is really they won't make a significant difference on the ground at all. At best, they may allow the Russians to hold some ground, but nothing more than that.
Indeed, with cold winter months approaching, Russia has been attacking Ukrainian infrastructure, such as the electricity network, demoralizing the Ukrainian population. But you have actually argued that things could be worse for Russia's forces. Why exactly is that?
First of all, Ukraine is getting a great deal of equipment from the West. It's getting hundreds of thousands of pieces of cold weather gear, enabling the Ukrainians, of course, to work far better. And that's crucial. In winters, as you well know, in Central Europe can go down, especially in the central Ukraine area, to minus 20, minus 30 degrees centigrade. And you simply can't operate in that. You need some training, you need some good equipment, and clearly the Ukrainians are rather better accoutred than that than a few tens of thousands of conscripts with a couple of weeks training and no unit cohesion. The likelihood is, though, that the winter is going to slow things down for everyone, including the Ukrainians, who rely really on their success on what's called maneuver warfare. And in weather that slows everyone down, maneuver warfare is probably we're not going to see as much of it as we've seen before. But certainly the Ukrainians are far better prepared than the Russians for this. And by the way, when we see the kind of equipment and scales that the Russian soldiers and new ones have, I certainly wouldn't want to be in their ranks now.
So you expect a slowing down in the months to come. Now, this week, Russia made the claim that Ukraine is manufacturing dirty bombs and that it plans to use them. How would you assess that claim?
First of all, this is another false flag attempt by Russia. We had a similar thing with the Novokakova Dam about 2 or 3 weeks ago, where the Russians said the Ukrainians were thinking of destroying it, and then said they really weren't. Mainly because, of course, it was the Russians who were considering that. As to a dirty bomb, there's no gain for either side on that. The fear was, of course, that this was another veiled threat by Putin to justify the deployment of some form of low-yield nuclear weapon in response. I doubt that any of this will happen. I think it's more saber-rattling until, though, and unless Ukraine gets into a position where it threatens Crimea. I think that's where some red lines will be crossed. But as to the dirty bomb, look, the only time none has ever been deployed. There were some allegations in the 90s Chechens were trying to deploy one. They're a Cold War trope.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for taking the time. Frank Ledwidge, as always, a pleasure.
Thank you, Claire.
IAEA inspectors are being dispatched to investigate Russia's claim that Ukraine is planning to use a so-called dirty bomb, ratcheting up nuclear anxieties in the conflict. Russian President Vladimir Putin says he directly ordered his defense minister, Sergey Shoi-gu, to call top NATO commanders to warn them Ukraine plans to detonate a low-yield radioactive device. Kyiv has rejected and condemned the claim. Ukraine says Putin is using nuclear blackmail to block support for its counteroffensive against the Russian forces. And there are fears that Putin may be preparing a false flag attack of his own. For more on this, I'm joined by Elena Sokova, Executive Director of the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation. Elena Sokova, I'm curious, weren't inspectors already supposed to be on the ground by now?
Well, last week, actually this week, earlier this week, the International Atomic Energy Agency and its General Director Grossi announced that the inspectors will be sent to the two facilities that Russia claimed that are developing the dirty bomb, so-called dirty bomb. But it takes time for the inspectors to reach the facilities. We are still in the war situation. They need to go by train or by car, depending on the locations where they go. We also need to be concerned about their safety and security so that their transit to this facility is secured with some military convoy or other arrangements. So my understanding is they are on their way and should be arriving any day now.
So logistics are challenging at these times is how we'll take that. Speculation that a dirty bomb could be used has been going on for days now. How valid is that concern?
Well, in my personal view, this is not a particularly valid statement. And I would have to really come up with any reasonable explanation. Why would Ukraine do that? Particularly if the plans are to use it on its own territory. But it is also something that I think, in my view, probably just another distraction, and as was noted, an attempt to stall some of the support for Ukraine. The dirty bomb, which is literally a radioactive material bound with conventional explosives, is intended to disseminate radiation, but its radius is going to be limited to the level of explosion and maybe a little bit over it if the material is can be easily dispersed. But from military standpoint, it makes no sense. What it would lead in terms of casualty, just the people who are killed or affected by an explosion itself, which is like a regular explosive, and the contamination of the area. So that is one of the issues with this whole scenario. But the second point is the two facilities that Russia named as a possible facilities involved in it don't even have the relevant materials. They may have some isotopes that could be used for the dirty bomb, but claiming that they're going to use some nuclear materials from these facilities makes literally no sense.
And we'll have to end it there. That's Elena Sokova. Many, many thanks.
You're welcome. Thanks.